Hello, welcome back to talkSPORT's YouTube channel, bringing you up to date with all the latest news from the football world. My name is Fergus McPhee, and joining me today is our talkSPORT football reporter, Ben Jacobs. Ben, how are you?
Very well. A lot better, perhaps, than some Liverpool fans after the weekend.
You slightly teased it a little bit there. That's where we're going to start. The only place I think to start is with Liverpool. Obviously, they lost 3-0 at the Etihad yesterday. That can happen to any team, but they're 8 points off Arsenal, five losses out of six in the league. What's going wrong?
Yeah, I certainly wasn't goading the Liverpool fans. I knew we were going to be speaking about Liverpool. And I think what's going wrong is some teething problems with a big summer spend that is naturally very exciting. And I think logically, a lot of people felt like Liverpool had won the window, but you only win football matches. And sometimes it's a lot harder when you have a big spend and a revamp to get that kind of instant chemistry. So that's one factor. And a lot of the new Liverpool signings compared to the Arsenal ones are expecting to be starters. So if you think of Arsenal's 11 and the new signings, yes, Victor Gyökeres and Eberechi Eze would definitely feel that they're there to be in the starting 11, and Martin Zubimendi too in the centre of the park. But there is the option for Odegaard instead of Eze. And Arsenal's midfield is tried and tested with a reliable player like Declan Rice in there pulling all the strings. And the others like Kepa, number two, Christian Mosquera, an amazing prospect, but he's going to struggle to play week in, week out with Saliba and Gabriel there. And of course, Noni Madueke. So Arsenal's starting 11 has fresh blood, but not necessarily to the same volume as Liverpool's, because Florian Wirtz, Hugo Ekitike, Alexander Isak, Jeremy Frimpong, and Milos Kirkos all feel they should be starting week in, week out. And at the moment, Mamadashvili is taking Alisson's place because he's injured. So that's a lot of change in a starting 11. And as a consequence, I think Liverpool are still working out partnerships. And that's been the big issue. How do you get the best out of Mo Salah? And is he in a different kind of role, trying to link up with Isak? How does Florian Wirtz get going? How do you accommodate potentially Ekitike and Isak when they're both fit and still again get the best out of Mo Salah? And Liverpool haven't quite found their way at the moment. And then the other root of the problem, which is more surprising, in my opinion, is defensive frailties. And whereas the first point I make is about all of these new players bedding in, the second one is about a back line other than the goalkeeper of, if you look at the game against Man City, Robertson, Van Dijk, Konate and Bradley, all players that have been at Liverpool for longer. And Ibrahim Konate in particular at the beginning of the season was looking a little bit shaky. And as a back line, Liverpool are making far more errors and conceding far more goals than they did when they won the Premier League titles. So that's something that Arne Slot will have to scratch his head about to work out how they can be more clinical at the back as well, not just in the final third. And if they can work out how to get back to where they were defensively last season and wait a little bit to build the chemistry between the attack-minded players and the new signings in particular, those two combinations should result in Liverpool getting back to their best.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because there has obviously been a lot of change, and you see this sometimes with promoted sides. Sometimes they'll spend heavily, have almost an entire new squad, and it takes a while to bed in. I guess I'd say, is it a bit more unusual to see it from a team that won the league last year?
Well, I think the team that won the league last year, if they change dramatically, even if people are really excited about the names coming in, aren't necessarily the team that won last year. So with Ekitike leading the line against Manchester City, Florian Wirtz starting the game as well, and a goalkeeper in Mamadashvili instead of Alisson, it's still difficult. And generally, you win titles because you've got an elite goalkeeper, you're defensively strong, and you've got at least one marksman capable of scoring 20, 25 plus goals with others contributing. And at the moment, Hugo Ekitike has been in and out the side, leading the line. Alexander Isak hasn't really got going. Mo Salah's not found chemistry with other strike partners. And Florian Wirtz has struggled to get goals and assists. So Liverpool are not the same side as they were last season, because at the back they're not as defensively resolute, and in the final third they've not quite found a way to be clinical. And I think that extends even to the run of games that they won at the beginning of the season, where they were needing last minute winners and they were also not playing at their full capacity. And this for me isn't about, are Premier League champions more equipped for significant change than other sides? This is really just a pattern, and there's very few exceptions to the rule. Sunderland are maybe the one example where you think, how have they signed so many players and spent so much and just hit the ground running with so much quality and chemistry? But the Chelsea project, which is maybe more akin in terms of the volume of business, if you look at Liverpool's summer and some summers that Chelsea have had, that has taken one or two of those players, even with Premier League experience like Moises Caicedo, more than one season to really get going. So it's easy to think Isak would just be a transplant straight into the number 9 and would replicate his Newcastle United numbers. Wirtz would be signed and would immediately have the same impact that he had in the Bundesliga. But very rarely do we see that. And this is why I don't think there'll be that much panic within Liverpool, because even though they're not where they need to be, as the season progresses and that chemistry builds, they're only going to get better and better. So if they can just stay within touching distance of the Premier League leaders, Arsenal, as we head towards the January period, from there, I expect Liverpool to be more consistent as the season progresses.
I want to talk about Alexander Isak because he's the most expensive player in British history. Didn't get any minutes yesterday. Are there concerns about his fitness, and were there any concerns about it when they bought him?
Not concerns about his fitness when they bought him. He's obviously picked up an injury and they're protecting him now as he returns to the first team squad, which is normal because Liverpool are fighting on multiple fronts and we've got the festive period coming. So I wasn't massively surprised that we didn't see him yesterday. And one reason for that, in my opinion, is if you start with the premise that Isak, if Liverpool were 0-0, 1-0 down, would have come on to try and get them back in the game or win the game. But then by the time you get to that roughly 1 hour mark, which would have been prime for Isak to come into the match if Liverpool felt they could have got something from the game, Jeremy Doku comes on and you're 3-0 down. And I think that Doku goal changed the perspective and probably made Arne Slot lean towards resting Isak, because even though Liverpool will never necessarily think they're entirely out of a game 3-0 down after an hour at Manchester City, and it doesn't perhaps lend itself towards giving giving Isak the minutes rather than resting him for what is going to be a long period ahead. And, the caveat to that is naturally that after you play Manchester City, Liverpool have got the international break. Liverpool have got a little bit of downtime so they can rest him anyway. But maybe he was only there in case he was urgently or desperately needed off the bench. And then as soon as that Doku goal went in, I think Arne Slot probably felt it was better just to rest him and make sure he comes fresh when Liverpool return against Nottingham Forest on the 22nd of November.
Mm. Oh, look, Isak has picked up an injury. He's not really hit the ground running, but you are someone who's very plugged into the world of transfers. We spoke a lot sort of during the window in the summer. When they signed Isak, they'd already made the signing of Hugo Ekitike up front. Were they at all in a situation, Liverpool, where they were almost backed into it? They'd been talking about it all summer, and did they get to the deadline day and think we have to sign him now? Did they actually need him?
No, I think it was the opposite. The Liverpool plan was always Hugo Ekitike and Alexander Isak. It was never a case of one or the other. The corner they were forced into, ironically, was Hugo Ekitike because Newcastle were going so aggressive to try and get him. Liverpool realised that they had to move. Whereas with Alexander Isak, they waited to try and do the deal on their terms. So this was not a panic move on deadline day. This was actually Liverpool trying to do Alexander Isak earlier and making an offer of £110 million fixed. It got turned down so emphatically that Liverpool said, we're not going to bid again unless we're given any encouragement. And the encouragement didn't really come until Nick Voldemade and Johan Wissa were signed. And at that point, the door opened and then Liverpool came back. And they didn't significantly up their offer for Alexander Isak. This wasn't throw money in the hope of getting a last minute deal done and giving Newcastle some incredible deal. This was Liverpool just waiting and backing off and letting Newcastle take care of their own business, particularly the strikers coming through the door, and then increasing their first offer by only £15 million. So nowhere near the 150 million price tag that we'd heard throughout much of the summer. And that increase is actually smaller, for example, than Manchester United's first bid compared to their last bid for Brian and Bumo, 45 million to 71 million. It's smaller than Newcastle United's first bid for Johan Wissa, 25 million. Their last bid for Johan Wissa, 55 million. So the way in which Liverpool handled that negotiation for a player of that magnitude and a British transfer record fee was very much on their terms. And to pay 125 million, even though, of course, that's a fixed fee, no add-ons, and it's a massive amount of money, but the jump from offer one to offer two, and the way in which Liverpool just ignored the noise, backed off, and then allowed Newcastle to open the door, that was part of a very structured and considered plan. And although, of course, Liverpool would have preferred Alexander Isak earlier, to get Isak and Ekitike, that was the plan. So they'll be delighted with the recruitment. The only thing that was altered by the whole saga is because it all played out very publicly, and Isak wanted to leave and he wanted to come earlier. But the time he actually arrived at Liverpool, he hadn't had that integration or pre-season. There was a mental toll. And this is why I think it's taken Isak and Liverpool a lot longer to really get going together, because had you signed him on June the 1st, then by now he would be very integrated. But because they got him effectively on deadline day in the early hours of the final day of the window, the time it's taken, I think, for him to really start this season, coupled with an injury, have resulted in an Alexander Isak that doesn't quite look like the same Isak that he was at Newcastle. But as with Florian Wirtz, I think Liverpool back themselves that both of these signings are going to pay off, and both of these signings will end up living up to their price tag.
You said earlier that Liverpool won't be panicking. So you're not sort of currently hearing any noises of concern around, their direction or the future of Arne Slot?
No, not at all, because he won the Premier League in his first season and he's been back to the point where on paper Liverpool should be stronger this campaign. And as a result, I think everybody at Liverpool tends to avoid knee-jerk reactions and ignore the noise. And if you look at Liverpool's run after the international break, they've got home games against Forest and PSV. They've got away at West Ham, who are struggling. They've got home at Sunderland, not an easy fixture, but still one that Liverpool would expect to win. And they've got away at Leeds United heading into the early December period. And that's what I mean about staying in touch with Arsenal, because Liverpool will expect to win all of those games. And if they can get a winning streak going, then they put themselves in a really strong position. And the aim for Liverpool will be to try and claw back some points on Arsenal over that festive period, or even the pre-festive period that I've outlined. So then they get to January the 8th away at Arsenal in form. And that's where they need to go and try and get a statement win. Because if they do, and they've got some victories before that, they'll be right back in the Premier League title race. And Arsenal proved against Sunderland at the weekend that they are fallible. So they will drop points. Potentially, they will concede goals despite that run of clean sheets. So I think Liverpool will not be throwing in the towel either on the Premier League title or on their manager Arne Slot.
Just finally, on that, the stats aren't necessarily in their favour. Only twice has a Premier League team in the last 15 years won the title after losing 5 games, both Manchester City, 2014 and 2021. But are you saying at the end here, reasons to be cheerful for Liverpool fans? It's not over yet.
Yeah, I think so. But they've obviously got to get going. They've got to start winning. If they can go on a run, they can still take 3 points off Arsenal on January the 8th. Other than Arsenal, the Premier League title is so tight. Liverpool are on 18 points. Man City in second place are on 22. So anybody that puts a run together at this point can climb up the table. Yes, at this stage, Arsenal look like the title favourites. They've got the continuity. They've got the confidence. They're barely conceding a goal. They've only lost 1 game. But Liverpool have got, form-wise and goals-wise, the two most potent attackers based on last season, other than Erling Haaland, in the entire Premier League. So the combination of Salah plus Isak with Ekitike added to it should allow Liverpool to score more goals and get going. And obviously, you look at the goals conceded, 17 compared to 8 for Man City and 5 for Arsenal. And that's the other area to address. But I don't think Liverpool will have given up yet on defending their Premier League title. It's a long season. There's a long way to go. And the only backhanded compliment that you can pay Liverpool at the moment is, given the volume of business they've done and the talent they have on paper, as the chemistry builds, you would think they're only going to get better. And I made this point during the first international break, where Liverpool, I think, heading into that, were maybe only 1 point off the league leaders. And to still be in touching distance in that last international break, even though they'd been a bit shaky, even though they'd needed late winners to win games, that was also kind of a compliment, because you felt like, again, they're only going to improve as the season goes along. And that point for me still stands. Liverpool are 8th at the moment, but I think come the end of the season, they will be in that title conversation, and they will still have the confidence to believe that they can turn this season around.
Just very quickly, where are Chelsea in that conversation? I was watching all the games play out this weekend, and I sort of looked at the table, and I don't know. I hadn't really been paying attention, I guess, but they've really snuck up there.
Yeah, they have, and so have Man City, by the way, as well. I think the season started with most people thinking Liverpool were the favourites, Arsenal would be right up there as well. Man City had defensive frailties, and Chelsea were a bit of a wild card. But what we're seeing at the moment is a young Chelsea side improve season on season. That's no surprise to me. It's a long-term project, and they're at a point in that project now where they would expect a return. The only thing about Chelsea that will maybe stop them being a title contender rather than maybe a 75 to 80 point team is the fact that they're young, they've had some discipline problems, and they've got potentially, because of the Club World Cup, a very long season ahead of them. And we don't know how that will impact in terms of injuries and fatigue when we get to the business end of the season. And that's why Enzo Maresca is intentionally rotating to try and keep everyone fresh. So we can't discount Chelsea from the title race, but they have had some inconsistent performances, even though their league position table is strong. And if that continues throughout a 38 game season, I think it will just knock off enough points to the point where, as I said a moment ago, they're 75 to 80 points rather than 85 to early 90s, which is what you may need to win the Premier League title. But it's Man City, for me, that are the ones that I think are going to sneak up under the radar, because they made a lot of signings before the Club World Cup that have now bedded in. They got knocked out of the Club World Cup a bit earlier, which wasn't great at the time, being shocked by Al Hilal. But it means, again, they've had a bit more of a pre-season. And the only real concern for Man City, even last season, was how many goals they were conceding, because everyone knows they can score goals for fun. And now you look at that column of goals conceded, 8. And everyone's talking about Arsenal and how they've got a brick wall defence. But Man City have only let in 8, and they showed against Liverpool that they're capable of these statement wins. So we have to start speaking about them as being major contenders for the Premier League title as well.
Ben, we always appreciate your input. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Always a pleasure. Speak soon.